Hey guys, it's Shira from Woodshop Diaries, and in this video I'm going to be sharing with you how to build this modern bookshelf from just one sheet of plywood. So if you're ready to get building, let's go. If you've been around for very long, you know that I love a good plywood project. Even better if all you need is one sheet. So I kicked off this project by cutting down my plywood sheet into several strips. I've provided a complete cut diagram in the building plans linked below, but I started by ripping 2 strips from the sheet to about 10.5 inches wide for the bookshelf sides. This video is not sponsored by anyone, but people send me personal messages all the time to ask if I really like the Craig rip cut. It's like they just don't believe me when I say it in a video. And the answer is yes. I use it every time that I cut plywood, and no, I'm not paid to do so. And yes, I do have a table saw that I could use instead if I wanted, but I'd rather just use the rip cut. Once I had my 2 wider strips cut from the sheet, I measured and cut what was left into 3 equal-sized strips. Now these will be roughly 9 inches wide, but with the kerf, it may vary slightly. Exact widths here aren't critical for this project, so if it's 9 on one strip and 8 7/8 on the other, that's totally fine. From each of the 2 wider strips, I cut 1 short and 1 long piece on the miter saw. The long pieces will be the sides of the bookshelf, and the short pieces will be the top and the bottom. From the narrower plywood strips, I cut a back and 7 shelves. All the dimensions can be found in the plans linked below, but the shelf size is also really easy to customize if you wanted something a little different than whatever I made here. After cutting, I had a few small pieces left that I took to the scrap pile. I'll use these for something else later. I know the pile is a little out of control, but these pieces often come in handy when I'm building drawer boxes, so I have a hard time getting rid of them. Bubby is silently watching and judging me with my messy wood room from his post on top of the table saw. He gives me dirty looks about it, but he secretly likes to hide behind the pieces, so I know he's not judging me too harshly. Anyway, at this point, I had all of the pieces for the bookshelf cut down, so I decided to edge band them all at once. Edge banding was by far the most time-consuming part of this project, and it's totally optional. You could easily build this thing in like 30 minutes if you didn't bother edge banding anything. If you aren't familiar with iron-on edge banding, it's simply an easy way to finish plywood edges to make them look a little nicer. I'll link a guide to how to apply it below, but you basically just iron it on. Once it was applied to the exposed edges, I gave everything a light sanding and began assembly. I assembled this with, you guessed it, pocket holes and screws. I don't really understand it, but I know that a lot of people have an intense hatred toward pocket holes. So if they're not your thing, feel free to use another assembly method. I drilled pocket holes into the ends of the bookshelf top and bottom plywood pieces, then assembled the main body of the shelf using pocket hole screws. Once the main shelf was together, I just needed to add the back. I debated on whether I wanted to attach the back piece onto the back edge of the shelf or install it inside the shelf between the top and the bottom panels. It really doesn't make any difference either way, but I ended up deciding to install this inside the shelf. So I trimmed it to fit, then centered it in the shelf frame, keeping it flush along the back edge. Then I secured it in place using a couple 1 1/4 inch wood screws at the top and the bottom. Then all that was left was adding the shelves. There are tons of ways to install these shelves, but just to irritate the haters, I grabbed a pocket hole jig again and drilled pocket holes into the end of each shelf. I kid about the pocket holes. I know they're a controversial subject. They work great in this project, but so would a lot of other methods too, so whichever one that you enjoy using the most, go with that. There's no right or wrong way to do pretty much any of this. Speaking of there being no right and wrong way to do things, you can also lay out your shelves any way you want. I just went with 3 shelves on the left and 4 on the right, and I just tried to keep them evenly spaced out. So I flipped the shelf on its left side and installed 3 left shelves using pocket hole screws, making sure to keep them square. Once these were secured to the side, I went around to the back and added a screw to secure the other end of each shelf. I used the speed square to make sure that the shelves stayed square while securing, and for now I just added 1 screw per shelf. I'll come back later and add a second. I flipped the shelf over on the right side and repeated. This time I added 4 shelves and made sure that they were centered between the other shelves. I also made sure that they stayed square while I attached everything. And just like the other side, once these were secured to the right side, I secured the other end of the shelves through the back. I also went back and added 2 screws for each shelf in the back here, making sure to keep everything square while attaching. And with that, this simple shelf was pretty much finished except for a few extra details. I flipped it upside down and used some wood glue and pocket hole plugs to fill the pocket holes in the shelves. This is totally optional. After the glue had dried on these plugs, I sanded them smooth, then finished it up with a clear coat. I used maple plywood for this build and the colors were already really pretty, so I just skipped the stain and just locked in the natural color with a clear sealer. And once this was dry, the shelf was ready for all the things. In reality, I built this for my dad to display his model cars on in his office, but it would obviously be a nice place for books, decor, displays, whatever. Just a note, because this shelf is pretty tall, narrow, and lightweight, I do recommend securing it to the wall to prevent tipping over. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this super simple shelf come together, and if you want to build your own, grab the plans that I've linked below. Thanks so much for watching, friends, and until next time, happy building!